Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're so happy to see you all.
Great.
And we want to thank you for your prayers and support. And we're just on the front lines as your teammates. And so we want to give you a report of what God's bringing the fruit from your investments. So we're going to get started. We're going to have time for question and answer at the end and prayer time at the end too. So without further ado, what are you doing? Okay. We're going to tell you about what God's doing among the Esimbi people of Cameroon that God sent us to starting in 1995. We've been there off and on since then. And we work with World Team. It's a mission that serves in 28 countries with about 400 missionaries. We've got about 22 missionaries in Cameroon, and that's our mission agency. So we serve in Cameroon, in West Africa, on the west coast, right above the equator. We affectionately call it the armpit of Africa. And yes, it's hot and sweaty there. So the Esimbi people live on the Nigeria border. They have 10 villages and a variety of smaller hamlets. They have a lot of people who have left the Esimbi area for various reasons, economic opportunities in the southern part of the country, and also their fear of witchcraft, which is their traditional religion. And now civil war that started 5 years ago. But when we left the village, we stayed there 5 years, and then we left the field in 2003. The Lord led us to come home to Colorado to get our kids through school, and then the Lord led us back in 2016. We relocated to the city of Bamenda, which is the capital of the Northwest region. And then the war broke out, and we had to relocate to the capital city of Yaoundé. That's where we've been living the last 3 years. And that's a city of 1 million people. And Douala is the big city on the coast, which has 2 million people. And we go there from time to time too. But anyway, to tell you about the Civil War, the country is divided into 10 regions, formerly called provinces. The Esimbi are in the Northwest region, and the Northwest and Southwest regions are on the west side of the country. They're former British Cameroon from colonial days, and then the eastern part of the country, which has the other 8 regions, is from the French in French Cameroon. So they united in 1960, and they haven't been getting along too well. So in 2017, some of the people from the west side declared independence, and they went their own country called Ambazonia. And that didn't go over at all with the government, so they sent in the military to crack down on that and try to keep the country unified, and nothing's getting resolved. So it's not safe for us to go to the Esimbi villages anymore, unfortunately. But a number of them, in fact, we've been told there's 500 in the capital city of Yaoundé where we are, so we still have a good Esimbi community there that we're involved in.
And also, we
Come up here, there's a microphone up there.
okay. And also, there are a lot that came down with us, and we keep in touch with them, and we talk with them in the village all the time, and they come to see us when they travel. People do a lot of traveling. So we still have a lot of interaction with them.
So here's some recent headlines from the Civil War. A lot of problems with the separatists and the military. There's atrocities on both sides, so it's very unfortunate. This is Yaoundé, this is capital city, this is downtown. There's a roundabout in the middle of the city with about 6 lanes, and there's stoplights all around the circle. And if you don't respect them, you'll get pulled over. Just ask me, I'll tell you.
Or if your skin is white. That works too. Because a dozen of black people can do the same. You can be in a line and you're the one that gets in trouble.
So this is just a taste of the traffic in Yaoundé. this is a major intersection near where we were living, and we have to be very careful with motorcycles coming in and out of traffic and pedestrians coming in and out of traffic and people getting on motorcycle taxis and in and out of car taxis, and it's very slow and frustrating and dangerous. So fortunately we haven't had any big accidents and no injuries, so we thank God for that. But we're happy to say God has provided a place for us to move away from this neighborhood.
Can I just tell you though about this, and I probably can say that about quite a few of the slides that I see, but for example, I think of one night a couple of months ago. We usually don't like to be out after dark, and we were on the other side of town, and we learned later were security guards about 2 o'clock in the morning, were running alongside the taxi, yelling for us to stop in French, and we don't really understand French, and it was probably one of the most terrifying times. So thank you for your prayers.
So when you get off the main roads, a lot of the side roads are not so smooth, and dirt or potholes, one or the other or both, and so we end up with a lot of flat tires. And fortunately there's a lot of these tire shops all around the city where we can get them repaired real quick and cheap. And they use this manual equipment, and they have air compressor to pump them up, and you get going pretty quick. Another issue we deal with in Yaoundé is electricity outages. So this was in our neighborhood one time. The electricity pole fell down and knocked out power to some of the houses in our neighborhood. Fortunately, that time I don't think it affected us, but we do get outages from time to time, and so we're very grateful for people who supplied the money for us to buy a generator. So we put this thing to a lot of good use this past year. It was a huge blessing. Kathy gets a lot of our food at these fruit stands, produce stands, in open air markets, and we get a good deal if she can know the correct price, because often if she's not familiar with a certain item, they'll give her the white man's price, which is higher, and she has to bargain them down if she's trying to get the real price. So we like this supermarket where we don't have to deal with all that. Prices maybe be a little higher, but things are clean and neat and orderly, and we can get everything from produce to hamburger to grubs. Well, we don't buy the grubs, but they're there in the store anyway, for those who do want them.
It tastes like chicken.
That's our favorite grocery store, and it's a big store with a big parking lot. And this lady is a Muslim lady facing Mecca in prayer. So you don't see this too often, but once in a while around town you do see the Muslims laying down for their, kneeling down for their 5 times a day of prayer. Anyway, the Muslims are mostly in the north, far north of the country, about 500 miles north of us. But they are around in the southern part of the country too. So one of our things is Kathy will hire somebody to kill a chicken and clean it, and then she'll clean it out when she gets home and cook up a good supper. So watch out for her when she's getting supper ready.
Especially with a knife or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So we went back to Cameroon in February last year after our last home assignment, and like I said, a number of the Esimbi live in Yaoundé, and this is one young Esimbi boy who died last February of a sickness, and so we went to his funeral, and they had the casket in the front yard, and his uncle in the fancy dress clothes at the right with the cap, he's actually a chief, and so he was hosting the event, him and his wife, and we went there and had the opportunity to share with the people and encourage them, and then they sent, by tradition, they sent the body to the village for burial. That's not always possible, but for them it was. In March, I had an infection in my left big toe and ended up it's so bad, swole up, that they had to remove my toenail, and but the infection kept spreading, and it was spreading to my other toes, so they had to increase the antibiotics, and finally, after triple antibiotics, they finally got it to clear up, and I didn't have any more problems, thank God. In May, another Esimbi youth, this young gal died of another sickness she'd had for a long time, and they had a different kind of funeral. They had the casket inside their living room with candles. This was the night of the wake keeping / visitation, and then they had her picture by the casket and the body in the casket with plexiglass cover and 4 candles around it. So it was very somber and quiet inside the house, but it was a stark contrast to what was going on outside the house. They had invited music praise team from church to come and sing, and everybody started dancing and clapping, and it was totally opposite of what was happening inside the house. So that was interesting. And then we got together with the family and consoled with them. And then we went home for the night. Some of them stayed all night. We didn't want to do that, so we came back the next morning for the burial. And they still had the casket in the living room, and this was her father on the right. And then we went with Pastor Alfred sitting here with his blind walking stick. He's blind. He's our right-hand man, and we go everywhere, do everything with him. And he's a Esimbi, so he can interpret for us when we don't understand what's going on. We were sitting there for a few hours and had some time on our hands, so I pulled out our Esimbi alphabet charts and literature that we had. So they were really popular, and people were interested to see what we have. So, in case you haven't seen it before, this is the Esimbi alphabet chart. We have 28 letters in the Esimbi alphabet. We use 24 of the English letters, all of them except X and Q. And we have 4 Cameroonian letters and 3 tone marks, because it's a tonal language and the tone of the vowels affects the meaning. So the people were interested in those, and so we passed those out. And the Esimbi diary, there's a sample on the table also. It's a little pocket calendar that has the months of the week, months of the year and the days of the week in Esimbi, plus the seasons and other interesting cultural information, and those are pretty popular too. This is one older lady, Ma Christina. She was so enthralled with the literature that she bought up all we had and paid me in advance for 10 more alphabet charts and 10 more diaries that she wanted to pass around. So that was very encouraging. Then it was time for the burial. We go outside. So their tradition is they bury the body under the house. So they had dug this big pit under the house and with crawl space underneath for the body to go under. And here in the city they use these fancy caskets, but in the village they'll just use a pine box or sometimes just a wrapper like these closed big long sheets of fabric that they wrap around the body. But
And I just wanted to say too that the reason that they bury under the house is because they believe that the departed person's body needs to be taken care of, and if it is not properly taken care of, they'll retaliate, and so they take care of it.
so this pastor presided over the proceedings and shared a word from the Bible and a prayer.
And you'll see too that there's a lot of syncretism. There is an awful lot of mixture of different religions. The people are animistic, but that's not always the appearance that you get, as well as you have all of these different influences that are coming in. And that's a huge difference between the Northwest and Southwest, and the center part of the country is the culture. And it is amazing how much meaning is passed on. Not necessarily, there's an awful lot through words, but there's an awful lot more that happens through culture.
So then they lower the casket down very carefully and gingerly with all the guys down there in the hall to get it situated. And then they'll eventually cover it with the dirt. But these were unfortunately common events this past year. One fun event was they have these parties from time to time, so we try to get involved in as many activities as we can with the Esimbi. This one happened to be at a bar, but don't hold it against us because that's where you get water, that's where you get soft drinks. And
Those are the restaurants.
it's the restaurant. So actually, it was a good time to always at these events. I like to share what God's doing with the translation, give them an update on the Bible translation and the literacy work, and they're always happy to hear about that. So last year around February, the translators finished the translation of the New Testament. We've been working on this since '95. First developing the language, developing the alphabet, and then getting translators trained and then starting to work on the translation of the New Testament. So I'm helping them as a linguist with their, as an advisor for the project with their language development, translation, and literacy. And I never learned the language good enough to do the translation myself. But we have 5 translators who've been doing the bulk of the work most recently. And so after they finished, we still had to go through several steps in the process to get the book ready for printing. So in April, we had an online session for a few days with myself and 2 of the translators, David on the far right and Elijah, and then Franz, who's our computer guru, helped us online with this online working session. So we use a program called Paratext that helps us with getting all the terms spelled the same way. So this is showing you some of the terms and making sure we have them entered in and standardized. So for example, the Esimbi word for God is Uhumbakana, and this translation has been going on over a process of over 20 years with a variety of translators using a variety of translation methods and a variety of spelling rules in the language development. And so they had about 20 different spellings for Uhumbakana. So we had to standardize the right one and get them all the same. And same for Jerusalem. They had 20 different spellings for the Esimbi spelling of Jerusalem. So we got them all the same this time.
And I did want to say right here, well actually it was the slide before, they were in 3 different locations, and part of that was because they were in different parts of the country. But Franz was in the capital of Yaoundé. That day is probably the first day that we had the generator and the electricity stopped. And so Brad was able to use that generator so that he could work from home.
Yes. Also, in June, David in the middle and Elijah on the right came to Yaoundé to work with me with the typesetting process. So we had to go through all 600 pages of the Esimbi New Testament and proofread it and make corrections and standardize the terms and the spellings. So we had a lot of work to do, and thank God we got it all done. We had them over and some other Esimbi people to discuss one major issue that was on our hearts, and that was what illustrations we were going to use for the New Testament. So we had experimented with the publication of the Christmas story and the Easter story with using some African pictures for artwork in the Bible stories. But they were pictures from northern Cameroon, which has a different culture and different dress from the Esimbi, and so that wasn't acceptable to them either. We were trying to avoid white man pictures because one of the complaints of the Esimbi and the traditional beliefs is that the Bible is a white man's book, and we don't want them to think that. We want them to know that it's God's word for everybody. And so we had this discussion about, okay, what are we going to do? So we tried to find pictures that were race neutral as much as possible. So we found some pictures like this, where you can't really tell whether that's black men or white men, and but it gets the idea of the meaning across. So thank God we've reached a solution on that. This is George on the right. He's the typesetter who helped us line up all the pages just right. We work in cooperation in Cameroon with the Cameroon Association for Bible Translation and Literacy, CABTAL for short, and they have their national headquarters there in Yaoundé. That's where my office is, upstairs. George is downstairs in the typesetting department, and he worked through it slowly, carefully, and got it all ready for printing. So we got 2 copies for the translators. It's a rough copy, but they could each take one home and show people what is coming. And so it was a very happy day when we could have the pre-dedication, as we're looking forward to the main dedication celebration within the next year, Lord willing.
And Brad, we just need to tell people that those copies, each one of them apparently cost several $100s. And the reason that they cannot do the printing in Cameroon is because they do not have thin enough paper. So they're going to send it off to South Korea, and where they'll print it and send it back.
So on the left is the general director of CAPTAL, and he was presenting them their translators' copies. So Elijah and David were very happy to have those, and we were very happy too. So praise the Lord. And they were singing and celebrating. So this is just a taste of the Esimbi celebration there. I'm sorry you couldn't be there. It was wonderful. So we had the Esimbi from the Yaoundé community and some of the CAPTAL staff, and it was a great day. So where is the translation now? Right now it's either in Dallas or Yaoundé. It's going back and forth because there's some problems with the files. I don't understand all this process, but it's taking a lot longer than we ever dreamed it would take. It's already been over a year since this day, July 2nd last year, and they sent the files to Dallas where there's Global Publishing Services, and they sent it back to Yaoundé for some corrections. Plus, not only Esimbi, but 20 other projects are in this bottleneck through this process at the same time. So George has got extra work. Him and his assistant, Ross Stan, in the typesetting department, they got an extra load of work right now. And so pray that it gets through this process and we can get it off to the printers and into the hands, back to the Esimbi, and get it in their hands, hopefully within the next year. That's how long we're planning to stay there at this time, is for the next year. We go back August 3rd, get there August 4th, and then we plan to come back home for our next home assignment end of July next year. So we want to have the celebration with them while we're there, and they're hoping to have the celebration in the village, but with the insecurity, it's a little still iffy. So they may have to do what some other language projects have done and hold it in one of the francophone cities where it's safe to meet. And there's Esimbi people in a bunch of those areas already, so we might do that in a few Esimbi communities around the French-speaking side of the country.
How much of the Bible is this?
The whole New
The
Testament.
New Testament, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a picture of the professor from Cairns University in Pennsylvania who'd been planning to come for several years as an ethnomusicologist. And for those of you who'd read the book, the culture book, many years ago, this is one of the 2 areas that we really targeted as needing some work. And the Lord has supplied in both of those areas. She was not able to get a visa for several years, and so she eventually had it on WhatsApp. And it was incredibly successful. I heard it likened to an arrow which pierces straight to the heart. You know, when people don't have the translation in their mother tongue, they read it glibly, they read the words, but it doesn't really have the meaning for them. And so this has been a real dream to be able to get this. This is me and Alfred. We are talking about the culture book. It's about 500 pages now, and there is a sample of the culture book, and Brad wants us to stop because he has to edit it all. And it's very interesting. It started as one single book, but it has now been separated into 2 sections, because the first part of it is it's very interesting, is the general Esimbi culture. For people, they need validation about their own culture and the benefit of it. But they also need to understand the spiritual implications of it. And so it's difficult, and also we're trying to get the translators to read this, because it's written for other people, but in the process maybe that they will, take to heart some of what is in it. In Esimbi, the language literally it's so complex that it's not spoken completely until men are in their 20s, and it's not, the culture is not known until they're in their 40s. And for a white person, and a woman at that, to write their culture is just not going to come across very positively to them. So it has to be written in such a way that they don't feel intimidated, that it can be speaking to them. So Alfred and I, he is wonderful. He's a blind man. He doesn't have physical eyes, but as a result, God has really honed his spiritual eyes. He's a poor Esimbi chief's son, and this is another funeral that we went down to in the Southwest. His aunt, who was in her 90s, had died, and these are usually all-night celebrations. And after we had been, well, let me just tell you, they're dancing around the casket, and Brad had a chance, as well as Alfred, to preach in Esimbi to the people, and they were really excited. This is while we were down there, we had the opportunity to go to a church that
That was
it
the
didn't change.
funeral.
Oh, this is the funeral.
And the next one. Just use those. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. This is the traditional way that they dance into the traditional way within the churches. And there are many Esimbi people in this church.
This is the choir coming in.
And most of the women don't speak anything but Esimbi. And the men often speak a very incomplete Esimbi. This is Brad preaching, and Evan and Alfred had an opportunity to preach. And this is Prosper. When we went down to that funeral, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, Alfred came to us and he said, "Okay, the bikes have arrived. It is time for you to go." And of course, most people were going to stay there all night. It was a very dangerous part of the country, and this man, we had taken him with us. He is an Esimbi friend who is also Special Forces. And when he told us that we had to leave, and I have to tell you this so that you all will know, you will never know how much your prayers mean. This was a few months ago, and we went to a compound that was off the beaten track. This man was scared to even wear his outfit because it was so dangerous. And his comrades were all scared for him. And we went off the beaten path, and we had talked about the fact that our truck with the insignia might attract attention, but under no means must we go outside. So we went around to a silent compound. Obviously there were people all around, but everything was quiet. And we had a very hard time rousing them, and they took us into a room with a cement floor that was maybe this high. And as we went through, the lock was just a very strong nails that they pushed back against the door frame. And sure enough, just as and it had open rafters, just as he went to sleep, someone started yelling, "Is anybody in there? Is anybody in there?" And then I don't know what it was. I heard chains clanking. And then they used a flashlight under the door. And fortunately, we were over in the corner where they couldn't see the shadows. And by this time, I'm thinking, it's a dead zone anyway. There's no reception. But regardless, it would do no good. And so I started praying, "Okay, Lord, I don't know if we're going to get out of this one, but please notify people at home that we need someone to be praying for us right now. And he had gone to sleep, and I didn't want to disturb him, but as things got worse and worse, I wish he was awake, but I wouldn't dare because I'd touch him, and he'd go, "Oh, what's the matter?" And they'd hear with these open rafters. And eventually he did wake up, and we waited until the sun was high, and they called us to tell us that someone was waiting for us. And we went out, and there were people all over, little children playing. And so y'all must have heard some of those prayers. Oh, and I'm sorry, Brad had to correct me earlier. That little boy, we have done quite, we'd taken his wife to the hospital. She had a very difficult pregnancy, and we've done some other things to help them with transportation and whatnot. And they said that when the baby was born, if it was a girl, they were going to name it Kathy, and if a boy, they were going to name it Brad. So this is Brad. And don't you want to talk about this?
Yeah,
Slide?
Elijah, who's one of the translators, he's also a school teacher, and he has this Esimbi literacy class in one of the schools. So people are learning the language even outside of the Esimbi area, so that's very encouraging to us. One of the literacy guys is Ephraim here, who's also a school teacher, and he and I, let me get on this side.
Oh, okay.
He and I have been working long distance on this another transition literacy primer, which helps the people who already know how to speak English transfer their literacy skills to Esimbi. And we needed to meet together in person to go over the final questions and get it all corrected and ready for typesetting. So it's in the process, it's in the typesetting process now, that and another primer and a storybook. This is a storybook on the left that Elijah wrote, a story about kids playing soccer, which is very popular in Cameroon. That's their number one sport. So even the adults will enjoy this. And then the one on the right is the tentative front cover for the transition primer. So those books are in production, and they're going to be necessary for the people to be able to learn to read the language, because a lot of them still don't know how to read the language. And this will be, they'll give them some motivation now that the New Testament is coming, so they want to learn how to read that. So these books will be very helpful for that. So pray that we can get those printed soon and into use in the literacy classes.
And this is a picture of the second. I told you there were two studies that we really wanted, an ethnomusicologist and a children's specialist. And he went to CEF to be trained. He's a pastor, and he has backyard clubs, even though many of the people have to flee their homes and go back into the bush. And he is getting as many professions as 300 and 400 from the children. And he is even, some of the parents of those children are coming to know the Lord. So that's really exciting. And this is one of his classes that he had.
Teachers that he trained.
Teachers that he trained. And these little things that they're holding up are probably certificates, because that is very, very important in Africa. And I can't even
That's
see
one of
which
their Sunday
this is.
school classes.
Oh, okay. The people, I know I have slides on it later, but I don't want to forget to tell you, it is just absolutely amazing how it's taken off. And we have people contacting us. People want their Bibles. They're ready for their Bibles. They want to know when their Bibles will be ready for them. It's just going great guns. It's just amazing. This is Joe. This was one of Wayne and Evan's friends in the first big Esimbi village where we lived. And he is now a pastor. And these are his children in an area in the South Coast. You will see Julius there at the edge. The children have had to come out of the area, and so his children are in Kribi, and they stay there during the year. And apparently he was visiting Joe at the time, and Joe has written to ask how he can get a hold of literature to teach his children. And these are more pictures of his children. And this is a picture of Alfred and Pride and John. These two boys are the orphan nephews of Alfred. And Pride is now, he missed out on school for several years, and now he has come down to Yaoundé. They're with us. And he is going to school, and he's headed to the engineer track. And he would appreciate your prayers. He is a very good student, and the Lord has just really blessed him. And he has his last test in high school tomorrow. And I spoke with him this morning, and he said that one is really going to be hard. And John is another orphaned nephew. Pride has always taken care of Alfred. Pride came to Alfred. His father had sent Pride to Alfred when he was a little boy. Pride is getting ready to leave. And so Alfred is training John to help him. And John also happens to be his sister's child, whose father has died. And she had many children, and he was called many, many times because this little boy, they didn't think he was going to live for the starvation. And so he's brought them, it's an especially difficult case, and so he has brought them to Yaoundé, and that's me after the accident. And we had a medevac to Nairobi, and my surgeon, when he saw us, he immediately said, "I want to know about Jesus." And we had 6 or 8 people come and talk to us in privacy that were Christians, and one said, we want you to send people to us. So they're taking me out of the apartment, and they're taking me down the stairs. Brad tried to get them to put my head at the top, but it didn't work. And their ambulance was a hollowed out van. It was really impressive. East Africa is far more progressed than West Africa. And this is the airplane that they took me on. It had a private nurse, the pilot, a co-pilot, and Brad. And we took 30 kilos of things is what we could take. Basically, most of our stuff is still in Africa. We grabbed a little bit of clothing, mostly for him, and all of our electronic things. So that's the ambulance, which really was more like an ambulance. They were very surprised in Kenya that we would tell them that they were so much, and they were light years ahead of West Africa. And there I am in the back. The Lord really sent that particular nurse, and we had a wonderful conversation in the back of this ambulance on the way to the hospital when they picked me up. There is the hospital room, and that is the couch that Brad slept on while we were there, and they were fantastic. They believe very strongly that a part of the healing process is the feeding, what they call the feeding. And so they gave us sirloin steaks and racks of lamb every day. Tremendous. And there's my shoulder, and there's I still have a titanium plate and 9 screws in the shoulder. And there is Moses and Jamie. They came to see us in Nairobi, and we were able to pass their number along as a contact. And then when we came home, this is a picture of all of the family together at Christmas time, us with Wayne and Sarah and Lily, our first little granddaughter. And we were able to go see Evan in Hawaii. We had never been before, but we had so many miles plus miles. We have, except for the first trip that we took, we have not paid anything for airfare. It has all been miles. And when we got to Hawaii, he gave us his bed, and he went to the living room. And so that was a neat remembrance. And this was at Christmas time. Easter time, okay. Evan came here to the mainland. He decided to do a manual job, and he has what a lot of the basketball players have. It can't be corrected, and it's under the kneecap. And he'd been until just recently on workman's comp for a year and a half. And while he was recuperating, he discovered that he really loved photography. And so now he is planning to travel the world doing his photography and paying his way around the world, because he figures since he's single, this is the time to do it. And this is our cargo. After we left, the other missionaries packed us out, and I was talking with Donna Debbie a little bit. There was a lot of spiritual warfare going on. I broke 5 bones in 20 months. And obviously there's a physical aspect, but it's really strange. They still don't really understand why. And just by falling into a cement floor, I have done I crushed this and I broke a hip. And the day that he was planning to be able to finish up his write-ups, this suddenly happened in the evening. And things like that have happened each time. And Alfred talks to me about it, and they all know that there's very much a spiritual aspect. The place that we were staying, the landlord was wonderful, but he comes from a part of the country that is very, 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 very deeply entrenched in witchcraft. And even the believers are scared when someone comes from this part of the country. And the missionaries had started telling us they wanted us out in the summer. And they were telling us that they wanted us out as quickly as possible. Like, from Friday to Monday they wanted us out, but we were too busy. And so this happened in the fall. That is where we are going back to. We're going to be moving to the bottom floor of this new home for the next year. The missionaries that are usually there are in the States for a year. And this is their living room and their kitchen. And this is a real thrill and excitement. This is the prayer conference. In the 1970s, you may not understand some of what we're saying, because in the 1970s, there was a missionary that came in and did church planting, but there was no alphabet. And so they did a very thorough job of teaching small groups of pastors. And there was a group of women that were really taught the gospel, and they became believers. This is an unreached people group, and I have heard it explained that those women are getting older and they're getting ready to die, but there's no written language to carry on the scriptures. And so maybe about 60 to 80% of the women are believers by word of mouth. And when we were gone, we started hearing about and got pictures. The women of Esimbi decided to have a prayer conference, and there were 1,000 of them. They came from Lower Esimbi and Upper Esimbi and met in Beneday, and they had a prayer walk. And this is a picture of that conference. And they were just pleading with the Lord to bring revival, and they are so earnestly concerned about their Bible that is coming. And we all expected it to be there a lot earlier than it is now, but obviously it's caught in red tape. So these are more pictures of that prayer conference. And have I skipped some video? This is they were walking here, and this is a video of them.
They were claiming the Esimbi land for Jesus.
And there are very few men, and that is really understandable because the Esimbi are polygamous. And it has to do with their culture, it has to do with respect. You can ask us more about that later if you're curious about that, but that's why you don't see many Esimbi men that know the Lord. Some of the other denominations are beginning to do more evangelism among the men, but in the past it's been pretty nil. So,
So a lot of you have already been involved in this project for years, and we're glad to share what God's doing through your prayers and support. If you're not involved yet, there's 3 ways. You can pray, you can give, you can go. And we have some prayer cards on the back table that look like this. Feel free to take a copy and put it on your fridge or in your Bible or in your dartboard, but pray for us. And pray for the Esimbi. Our support comes through our mission agency, World Team, and we can get checks through them or online giving. There's their address and website. And we have 2 ways to give besides. One is for our missionary support. Number 1, that's ongoing. For the past 6 months since we've been home, our support level has dropped to 80% of our budget, so our support account we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, and it needs to get back up for us to go back to the field. And second, we have the Esimbi New Testament publication as a special project. We've been raising funds for that to get the Bible printed and into their hands. So far, we've raised $31,000 for that. God's blessed us with, and still need $4,400 more to finish the project and get it all the way through to dedication. So, and we need people to go. We still need more missionaries in Cameroon. We need interns next summer for this ethnomusicology workshop. So if you know somebody who's a music major or they were a music major, we'd love to talk to them.
and I'm sorry, if I did not tell you the ethnomusicology, they had the one workshop and it was very, very successful. And she wants to come back again this next year and bring interns. So that's what he's talking about.
So the Lord gave the word. Great was the company of those that published it. It's a team effort, and we're excited to have you all with us in this team. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. We'll try to answer them.
Right on the language itself, now the people, they're still learning the language, right?
Well,
as you've written
yeah,
it.
they're learning how to read it. They're used to
They're
speaking
learning
it.
how to read it.
Yeah.
They can speak it,
Yeah, they can speak it, but they don't know.
but they don't know how to
All
read
of them
it.
don't know how to read it. Yeah, there's just very few that know how to read it yet. So there's still a lot of work to do with literacy. Yes.
And the literacy groups are just going like fire. Elijah has them. They now have an Esimbi literacy group online. I mean, technology comes to all parts of the world, and it's amazing. And they're just going great guns. It's really exciting. And you might have noticed earlier that there was a lady in the picture at the dedication that was in a wheelchair. She's a Esimbi, and she has maybe 2 master's degrees. But she was disabled when she was a child due to a shot. And her brother, she has 2 brothers, and one of the others was affected the very same way. And they're both, I think, they're all very, very involved in education. It was her mother that ordered the extra charts. The brother that was not affected is a very big educator in Yaoundé, and he has a lot of schools, which is pretty unusual for Esimbi, but they are starting. This last year, the girl who won the Africa Best Songs Award for the Africa Soccer Championships that were held in Cameroon is Esimbi. And when they asked her, they said, "Your music has got some very unusual something in it. We don't understand." And she said, "Well, I don't, because she's been away from the culture, but she grew up in it, or surrounded by it. Her father is also a musician, and she's a musician. And she said, if you know, I don't know what it is, but I can tell you I'm a Esimbi." And so they're starting to have some lawyers, some doctors, some PhDs, and some some very, very renowned people, but they're still very far back, and they're just making their way out. So.
Another question.
So your organization then has helped over time to get their language in a written form. And of course, your primary goal was to correct me if I'm wrong, is to get the Bible
Right.
in their language. But as a result of all of this too, not only just the Bible's coming in their language, but it's helped solidify the written form of their language, which will affect their whole culture.
Exactly. Yeah, the language development has multiple benefits. When they have first received, like the diary, we first printed it in 2001 when the language committee approved the alphabet. We immediately published an alphabet chart and one of those pocket diaries, pocket counters, and that was the first book in their language. And so they were very happy to see their language written. So they felt like they were actually looked down upon by other people in Cameroon, by other tribes, because they're viewed as backward and they're out in the bush and those people out there, you know. So when they see their language written, it helps lift their self-esteem and lets them know that God loves them and God sees them as valuable and important, and their language is valuable and important. So that's been a privilege to see their positive reaction to that. So they love us. They have welcomed us with open arms, and we've had 3 other couples, families in World Team that have helped us through this journey, and we're just standing on their shoulders and taking it to the finish line with the New Testament. So we're just so excited that we've been able to have a part in it.
And I didn't know, did you say earlier there are about estimated at least 54,000 now, Esimbi, but they're over a huge area way out along the border.
But it sounds like a lot of them are in the towns too, from what you were saying.
There are 500 in Yaoundé, but Yaoundé is a million people,
Yeah.
so
So we're going to come up front, and we want to invite whoever wants to join us for prayer. We need a lot of prayer. We have been surviving this past year through prayer, and God's brought us through, healing her broken shoulder, her broken hip, and her other 3 bones that she broke the year before that. And we prayed, please God, no more. We have had enough of that, really. So, and we want God to give the scriptures to the people in their hands and their hearts. Pray that they'll have open hearts to receive it with faith and obedience, and they won't just put it on their shelf like a lot of Americans do, that they'll read it in their families and in their churches and use it and follow it. So
Will they have to be paying for their copies?
$4,
but
2,000
it's being
francs.
supplemented. There is an organization that is supplementing them, and they already want them.
So they're saving up their money. Yeah.
And I need to talk about how beautifully the culture and the language dovetails. And I forgot what I was going to say. One of those moments. I'm getting older.
So we could have these 2 people, if more want to come up, really, we request your prayer, and then others of you can just agree in prayer that God will bless us, that God will bless the Esimbi people, and bless His word and make it fruitful. That's our prayer request.